We have witnessed the fate of Week 8. What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch here, back with another weekly NFL reaction, reacting to Sunday's games. Each and every one of them. We're going to talk about it, beginning with Sunday Night Football. Typically, I release this video before Sunday Night Football or during halftime of Sunday night. But since it was Niners, Cowboys, an epic, storied rivalry with a football team in the Niners that gets a lot of publicity, love, and hate on this channel, I had to talk about it. I had to include it. I wasn't going to miss out. So let's talk about that first. The 49ers finish the Cowboys 30-24. It was a dramatic, wild, roller coaster football game. The Niners win. They cover the spread. They win by 6. At one point, they were absolutely hammering the Dallas Cowboys, but they let them back in the game a little bit. Near the end, it appeared that Dallas might actually have an opportunity to go on a game-winning drive, but the Niners once again clutched up with a big defensive stop, 4 and out. They got the football back and secured the victory. So a wild game and a lot to discuss. This was a huge victory for the Niners and an equally huge defeat for the Dallas Cowboys. The Washington Commanders won a dramatic game at the finish against the Bears, which we're going to talk about. I already talked about it actually in the past, but as you guys will notice in this video, I recorded a little bit before the game and then the rest after the game. So you'll check it out. But 30-24 Niners. The Cowboys, they drop a game. They're 3-4. The 49ers are 4-4, and they're right in the race to win this NFC West. Not only that, but this is huge for the Niners because they have a bye week, and then it is scheduled. It has been told. It has been reported that arguably the best football player on earth, Christian McCaffrey, returns in Week 10, and the Niners are just going to be getting healthier. Plus, they have the whole trade deadline to add some players to potentially get on a little bit of a run to win this division and potentially get in the mix for an NFC contender spot. Because the NFC, honestly, besides the Lions and maybe the Packers, who we'll talk about weren't super impressive today, I feel like the Niners have as good of a shot as anyone to get to the NFC Championship, especially considering their history. So in this game, it's funny because at moments they looked like a team that bottom 10 in the league. And then at other moments, they looked like the best team in the league. So that's just been the season for the Niners. I mean, overall, they even brought it up in the fourth quarter with the anticipation that the Cowboys might come back, that the Niners really have beaten themselves multiple times this year. We've talked about it on the channel, and that's been a big narrative for us that has been BLV versus consensus, so to speak, is that the Niners, they should be, when you really watch them and you look at them, they should be like a 5-2, 6-2 type of team. They blew multiple fourth quarter double-digit leads against divisional opponents that they should have won. The Cardinals and the Rams. If they win those games, people are looking at them entirely different, totally different, right? They'd be 6-2. Instead, they're 4-4. And they nearly blew this game. But the thing about the Niners is they're very beat up. And even at the end of that game, I have to give them a lot of respect and a lot of admiration for how they finished. Because by the end of the game, they didn't have Jordan Mason. They already were without, obviously, Brandon Ayuk, but they were without Juwan Jennings, who didn't play in this game. Christian McCaffrey, obviously. So Mason was out. Then Debo was out. So they were playing like the last 10 minutes of the game without these players, having to secure it with a big crunch time drive. And you could just tell they just had no players on offense left. The defense, they're going to get Dre Greenlaw back, potentially Hufanga back later in the year. I'm sure they'll make some trades to add to this defense that looked at times in this game very, very good. But the Niners have this problem, I feel like, where they have a problem with attention span. They're like a little kid playing with their toys. Like, at one point, it looked like, we're going to easily beat the Cowboys early in this game. They came out, they got an early stop. It looked like it was just going to be a repeat of every Cowboys-Niners game we've ever seen. Niners get the ball, they drive down, they get a field goal. Okay, not a touchdown, but they get the lead early in the game. Then Dak throws an interception. Then you're like, okay, this is going to be a blowout. But actually, the Cowboys defense plays with fight, plays with grit. The Cowboys actually go down, take the lead, and have the lead entering halftime at 10-6, I think. And just double checking, 10-6, yeah. And honestly, at halftime, like, the Niners looked to be the more explosive team, is the way I would put it. Like, they had plays on the table that they just were not hitting. Debo scored like a 70-yard touchdown that was called back for holding. They had multiple misses. Purdy was playing terrible. The way he was throwing the football inaccurately, the way that he was missing players like open for first downs on fourth down, like Debo Samuel. There were just mistakes by the Niners, especially on offense. And then defensively, it felt like they were just getting chiefed. Like 3 yards, 4 yards, like a dirty smoke and mirrors drive by the Cowboys. Kind of similar to how the Cowboys moved the ball against the Steelers in that Steeler game. It was just like slow grind, a slow death. And the Niners just put a halt to it at the beginning of the third quarter. They came out of the third quarter. I don't know what they took. I don't know what they said. I don't know if Kyle got pissed off at the team. I don't know if Fred Warner had a speech. Nick Bosa said something. Debo said something. But they came out, and they came out like last year's Niners. And they just laid a whooping on the Cowboys for a full quarter and a bit, where they put up 3 straight touchdowns in the third quarter and actually 24 straight points. And the Niners at one point were up 27-10, 17-point lead entering the fourth quarter. And it felt like they just were in cruise control, domination mode. And we've seen it multiple times this year. It happened against the Rams. It happened against the Cardinals, where the Niners looked absolutely dominant, like their former selves. And then they just kind of like playing with their toy, playing with their food, like kind of letting the team back in it, not really caring, not playing with the same physicality, not playing tight coverage, making mental mistakes, letting teams get stops, not properly securing the lead. And then Dallas goes down, quick drives, like 2 quick drives, which a great player like Dak Prescott at times, right? He's been a great quarterback at times. In this game, he was not. We'll talk about that. CeeDee Lamb, like one of the best receivers in the NFL. He just goes slice and dice up and down the field, and they score 2 touchdowns while the Niners are kind of sleeping at the wheel, and all of a sudden it's a game. And honestly, like, that made the Cowboys look good at the end of the day. Like, the Niners should have won this game by 3 scores. Like, this was utter domination. I haven't really checked the stats, so I'm going to look at it now. The Niners had 459 total yards, including 223 rushing yards. Plenty of those came from Brock Purdy. Some of those came from Isaac Guerendo, who ended up with 85 yards. Jordan Mason got injured early in this game, once again killing my fantasy team. Brock Purdy had multiple touchdowns. He had a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown. And George Kittle on National Tight End Day did his thing. I think, honestly, probably, again, like last year, he was the best tight end in the league during the regular season. I think so far this regular season, he's also been the best tight end in the league. 6 catches, 128 yards, and a touchdown on today's game. And you look at the Niners, and it's weird, again, like statistically, they only won by 6. But again, like statistically, every game, it feels like the Niners, when they lose, they're the better team. When they win, they're the better team on the stats. Like, they had 175 more rushing yards. They had 8 for 16 on third down, which is 50%. The Cowboys only 4 for 12. And then the Niners, they did fail a fourth down early in the game. Like I said, a drop / a bad throw by Brock Purdy. I'd put it more on Brock Purdy personally. The Niners only punted 4 times. They didn't throw an interception. They did have 9 penalties for 73 yards early in the game, which I think allowed the Cowboys to score, especially on that first drive by Dallas, to end up getting the lead. But honestly, man, like, I would just say that the Niners were the better team, but they can't keep letting teams back in these games. They can't keep letting this happen. And the thing is, it's hard to blame them at the same time because they're dealing with so many injuries throughout games. Like, there is no team in the NFL right now like the Niners where they just get guys hurt, like, constantly throughout games. I don't know if it's, like, the wear and tear of how many late postseasons they've been to, if it's just the players themselves and the condition they're in, if it's the physicality of the way they play, if it's, like, I don't know what it is, but they just always seem to be without, like, 3 or 4 players by the end of the game. And it just totally changes the team and the momentum and the vibe. Like, they haven't been able to complete a game where they've been able to keep the same team for the entire time. I thought Brock Purdy in the first half was pretty shit. I'm not going to lie. Like, he was missing throws. He was, nearly turning it over. I thought he had, and it was bad to me because, like, against the Chiefs, you could kind of say that the Chiefs' defense just played well, and that forced Purdy to play poorly, although Purdy made some boneheaded mistakes. It wasn't like Purdy was making mistakes that were costing his team, but it was more so that Purdy was missing plays. And so that was the difference for me in this game, where Purdy won't be negated via statistics in this game. You won't clearly see who he threw 2 picks, he threw 3 picks, he had a fumble. You won't really see that in this game. What you'll see is you'll have to watch the tape and you'll have to see, oh, Purdy missed this throw. Purdy missed that throw. Purdy could have done this. Purdy could have done that early in the game. And I honestly felt like if he does a couple plays in the game, if they don't hold on the Debo touchdown that, probably would have been a touchdown anyways because he was wide open, they probably are leading at half. They're probably up by 10 points at half. Instead, they're trailing by 4, So that's just been the Niners this entire year. And that's what I think moving forward, the Niners are always a slow starting team. And some of it has to do with, I think, Kyle's offense. I think he learns what defenses are doing and he's able to adjust to that and be able to pick on things that are tendencies of those defensive coordinators and schemes. I think part of it is learning what his team is good at and bad at. I think part of it is the personnel, adjusting to personnel, weaknesses, strengths, injuries, things like that, and being able to hone in on an identity. I think Kyle is been consistently one of the best coaches over the back half of the season. You look at his record over the last few years in November, December, January, it's pretty impeccable. I mean, besides probably Andy Reid, it's probably the best in football. So, I mean, you look at just this team and I think they're weird because I felt like early in the game, they were very disappointing. Even the defense, the way they were tackling, I felt like the pressure wasn't quite getting there. I thought Mike McCarthy did a good job with his script on the first couple drives. And give Dallas credit early, too. They came off a bye. They were well prepared early in the game. I thought they had a good script offensively that allowed them to get the lead. I thought that they were able to, the first drive was pretty shit. I will say that. Like, they ran a draw with a fullback on the first third down in like 8 of the game, which was awful. But besides that, I would say that the Cowboys defense clearly came out with a plan to attack Purdy, and it was working. It was forcing missed throws. It was forcing errors. And that was pretty much like the game plan of every team last year against the Niners on defense was like, we kind of have to blitz Purdy. We kind of have to be very aggressive because they're going to kill us anyways. Like, they're going to beat us for 500 yards no matter what we do. So we just have to be super aggressive because their offense is so good. Now, this year it's a little bit different because they don't quite have the personnel on the skill positions, especially in this game without Jawan Jennings and Christian McCaffrey. But like last year, the whole game plan by like the Lions, for example, the reason they had the lead, not only their offense was amazing, but they just basically blitzed the entire time. The Packers kind of similar, but kind of different. The rain helped in that game. The Chiefs kind of got away with playing that style because they're so good in the secondary, although they could have been beat for more plays, but that's just the way the Chiefs play, right? And then, even in the games against the Ravens and stuff, like blitzes cause mistakes by Purdy, despite, the Ravens giving up like 500 yards in the game, they were still able to hammer the Niners because of the turnovers. And you look at the Vikings game early in the year, like it's a common theme with the Niners. It's like teams that attack Purdy, it's rather going to kill you. You're rather going to eventually die, or you're going to somehow cause mistakes where you get a lead and maybe you have a chance to win, or maybe you blow them out, or that's rare, but maybe you're able to gain an advantage because it forces Purdy to play the worst of his ball, which has been more possible lately, it feels like, than in past years. But at the end of the day, the Niners were the better team. The Niners had a dominant third quarter, and a dominant third quarter through the run game, through the pass game, through the play action game, through some clever play calling by Kyle Shanahan, and through some motivation, through some anger. It just felt like they were angry. They came out angry from halftime, and they finally made a decision of like, we are not going to just be conservative. The defense I thought played really, really well to start the second half. I thought that the defense played really well. I thought through the first 3 quarters, and then they kind of let themselves go in the fourth. And then when they needed to step up in the fourth, they stepped up, which is championship defense for sure. CeeDee Lamb still put up numbers if you have him in fantasy. 13 catches, 146 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Something he hasn't really accomplished against the Niners before. The Cowboys still struggled to run the ball. Zeke Elliott had 10 carries for 34 yards, 3.4 yards per carry, and a touchdown. I think the Niners' run defense has definitely improved. I would say, like, especially in terms of a yards per carry basis. I still wish that they would be a little bit more dominant at times on early downs against the run, like cause more negative plays. I think part of the reason the Niners defense isn't as dominant as I think it should be is because they don't cause enough negatives. I think it's because they're a bad blitzing team and they're not a dominant run stopping team. I think they're a solid run stopping team, and I think that's shown over the last few weeks, but they're not like a team that just causes negatives, causes 1 yard gains consistently. It's usually like 3 yards a carry, which is good. But like it's not like winning you the game on early downs, if you know what I mean. And then offensively, they're kind of sputtering because of all the injuries. Like one series Debo is out, one series Debo is in. One series Kittle is banged up, one series Kittle is back. One series Mason's hurt, one series Mason's not hurt. Like once McCaffrey comes back, I just feel like it's going to bring so much more consistency to the short passing game, to the blitzing answers, to the running game. Just those subtleties in pass protection where Purdy gets sacked on, a second down later in the game that nearly got the Cowboys, it got them a stop, and then it got them the ball back. That sack on second down to force a 3rd and long. I think it was a 3rd and 10 where he just checked it down to Kyle Juszczyk. That second down blitz, if that's McCaffrey, that's probably picked up because the guy just went right around Garendo. Even if it's Mason who got hurt, again, that probably is picked up. So I think injuries and things are causing the team to look more ill-equipped than I feel like they should be looking. I'm not just going to blame everything on injuries, but I mean, they did win this game. I just think they just needed to win this game. They survived. They won this game. They should have won it by more, but ultimately they get it done. When it comes to Dallas, I thought Dak was pretty up and down throughout the course of the game. I thought early on he played solid football, but he did throw a pretty ugly pick on the second drive where he forced it into double coverage. I think the big thing with Dak in this game was he was just forcing too much. He was trying to make plays that weren't there, and I've seen that throughout the season. I think that's in the back of his head that he needs to be Superman. He needs to throw on a cape. He needs to save a defense that isn't any good. Like, I feel like Dak kind of just he doesn't have a good grasp on how a game is going, like game flow. He just tries to go out there and like ball out every game and put up huge stats. Sometimes that's not necessarily needed. Sometimes the check down is a perfect pass. Sometimes just find the completions. I did sense from Dallas, as I sensed last year when they played the Niners, that they just don't have a lot of explosiveness on offense. If it's not CeeDee Lamb making a play on like a deep crossing route or a yak play, they just don't have a lot of explosion. Maybe the odd like reverse from Turpin or something like that, but they just don't get like explosive runs at all because their running backs are washed. Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott would have been fantastic in 2018. But, they just don't get explosive passes. They don't have a deep threat. They don't have a guy that can get down the field and scare defenses to make them back off. The Niners played quite a bit of tight man coverage, I felt like, on big plays in this game, later in the game. I felt like they did have some nice schemed plays on those 2 drives where they were able to go down the field, but I almost felt like that was more Niners kind of letting their foot off the gas, which was a mistake by the Niners, more so than it was really Dak or the Cowboys. Maybe I'm wrong about that. You guys can let me know in the comments, but that was kind of the sense that I got. And again, inability to run the ball. I did feel like their pass protection for the most part was improved from past weeks. I would say that there was some big sacks in the game and a couple big pressures by the Niners in key moments that were big for their stops, especially on that last series. Bosa had a sack. number 91 on the Niners, I forget his name. He's really developing into a quality interior pass rusher. I've liked him the whole year. I hope they keep him in the rotation. D. Winters also got hurt in this game. I thought he was playing well. Devondre Campbell seems to be a liability continuing in the middle of the field in coverage. Fred Warner, I thought, had an up and down game. He had some really high highs in this game, but I felt like he also had some lows. Maybe it was just what they were asking him to do in terms of like carrying CD Lamb across the field at times. It felt like he was always in that spot having to cover him, and he just wasn't up to the task. I thought Lenore was fantastic once again. He had an interception in this game. Charvarius Ward had a couple penalties, but I thought overall played pretty well. And again, I thought the Niners corners played exceptional. When they asked them to actually play, corner in this game, I thought they played pretty well. And the safeties, Jair Brown and what's the kid's name? Mustafa. Those two guys continue to impress. Brown had an interception. Mustafa had a really nice pass breakup, hits like a freaking tank. The Cowboys defense, I thought that some of their guys stepped up pretty well in run defense. I thought overall they played pretty respectable football. I know they gave up like 223 yards at the end of the game, but it didn't really feel like that. It felt like it took some time for the Niners to break off some runs, and some of them were receiver runs. Some of them, Ricky had a big run. I think Debo had a run or something. Purdy had a few scrambles. Like, it was an added effort. It wasn't just running backs. Like, on typical running back runs, I thought they did about as well as I would have expected. Their corners, I thought, played pretty good. They asked them to play a lot of man coverage down the field, and the Niners, like, without their personnel, they mostly struggled to separate out there when they needed to, later in the game. Chris Connolly was out there a lot, which isn't ideal. You'd like that to be Juwan Jennings. Debo, when he was out there, was playing pretty well and was actually getting open, but Debo was in and out of the lineup as expected, but he also got banged up later in the game. I do wonder if the Niners will make a move at the deadline, but I also think they were really missing Juwan Jennings. I will be intrigued to see if the Niners make a move for a receiver. They'll definitely study this tape and see if they need to do that, but a guy like Deontay Johnson, I think, could adequately replace Brandon Ayuk. I honestly just feel like they need McCaffrey. Like, you get McCaffrey in there, you get Juwan Jennings in there. Those are two guys that can beat man coverage pretty effectively. You add a D tackle to your defense, help your run defense. That helps your overall defense, in my opinion. You maybe add another edge rusher to help with this rotation of the defensive line, keep them fresher, right? But yeah, like, I think the Niners are still on a level that I think they're a top 10 team. I think the Cowboys are kind of what I thought. I thought they played a little bit better this week overall than we've seen in recent weeks. Just in terms of, like, I thought they just played more buttoned up for the most part on the defensive side, and they didn't like let it be easy for the Niners necessarily, especially early in the game. And Purdy was kind of terrible in the first half. He stepped it up in the second half, played pretty well in the second half. Prescott was kind of up and down, but played pretty bad in the first half, made critical mistakes in the second half as well, did have a couple drives. But overall, Sunday Night Football was an event. It was a roller coaster. The Niners took it. The Niners won it as expected, but all that mattered for them was the ultimate victory. So 49ers take it on Sunday Night Football. I wasn't going to hit record. I was going to wait for the end of Sunday Night Football, and that recap just happened. But I'm recording before. What I just saw, the Maryland Miracle by Noah Brown and Jaden Daniels. The Commanders with an absolute miracle win on a Hail Mary. Crazy throw by Jaden Daniels. Incredible execution on the Hail Mary. And an incredible collapse by the Chicago Bears that pretty much collapsed throughout the entire game. That wasn't even the worst play that they had the entire game. There was a play where they tried to hand the ball to Fridge on the 1 yard line, and they fumble the ball because they're trying to run an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, fullback dive, and they fumble it at the 1 yard line. They somehow still persevere and are able to take the lead with about 22 seconds left in the game, and it looks like the Bears are going to win. But then all of a sudden, an incredible execution on the Hail Mary tip drill and a little bit of luck sprinkled in, and the Commanders, with the Maryland Miracle, pick up a win in one of the games of the day, low key. A game between the second overall pick and the first overall pick, Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels. The Commanders are able to win 18-15. A 3-point win for the Commanders that never should have happened. The Bears probably believed they were the better team in the game. And honestly, watching, especially the second half, the Bears thoroughly dominated the second half of the game. The first half of the game, the Commanders appeared to be the better team. Their defense played lights out. Caleb Williams looked really shaky early in the game. And Jaden Daniels looked like the better player. Ultimately, it was a tale of two halves and a miracle in Maryland. So let's start with that one, man, in terms of the Sunday during the day action. 18-15. Commanders take it. This was a weird score because it was a bit of a defensive slugfest, but it was pretty much like the Commanders kicking field goals versus the Bears sputtering in and out of offense and having 2 touchdowns at the end of the game that essentially gave them the lead at 15-12, right? The Commanders were the more consistent offensive team throughout the entirety of the game, but the Bears, because they scored touchdowns and not field goals, were able to take the lead that it appeared would be enough at 15-12, and then ultimately, the Commanders hit a Hail Mary to win the game. So when we look at it, the big storyline is the 2 quarterbacks, right? Caleb Williams, 10 for 24, 131 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, a 59.5 passer rating. He did have some rushing action in the game as well. Jaden Daniels, 21 for 38, 326 yards, many of those yards coming on a Hail Mary, a touchdown and 92.7 rating. I don't think his numbers would have looked that impressive if not for the miracle touchdown, but still, he did have the statistical better performance than Caleb, and we'll talk about why I think he's just flat out better than Caleb here in a second. Rushing-wise, DeAndre Swift led the Bears, 7.2 yards per carry, 18 carries for 129 yards, and a touchdown. The Commanders definitely missed Jonathan Allen in this game. And receiving-wise, no one really stood out. I mean, Keenan Allen looked like he was making some plays, and he drew a pass interference that set up the game-leading touchdown. I felt like Terry McLaurin did have a big, 60-plus yard deep ball to set up the Commanders in good field position for one of their scores. Rome Odunze, I thought, had one of his better games. He did have 3 catches for 41 yards, and he just looked more fluid in his routes, like he was gaining more separation, making more plays out there. He did have 3 catches on 6 targets, and then, of course, Noah Brown with the Hail Mary. But yeah, a pretty wild game between 2 teams that I look at as kind of wild card contenders. Perhaps the Commanders with this win can catapult themselves to an NFC East championship. This is the type of win or loss that could kind of dictate whether you win a division or fall short, right? The Philadelphia Eagles, we'll talk about them, had a huge victory over the Bengals on the road. Very impressive win in that second half of that game. But the Commanders, once again, strung together a lot of effective long drives, but they were pretty much held to field goals throughout the entire game. They end up with 481 total yards. Even if you strip away the Hail Mary, they still have over 400 yards in the game. They had 23 first downs in the game, but they were inefficient on third down, which was ultimately where they struggled in the red zone. Their kicker came through, Siebert, with how many different kicks? 4 field goals? 4 field goals in the first 3 quarters. They had an effective balance of running and passing. And I thought early in the game, Daniels looked more accurate, more composed. I thought that he persevered through the rib injury, showing some toughness and some composure and some leadership for his football team. On the other side, I thought Caleb was very shaky, his accuracy. I thought he was missing guys that were open, missing guys that weren't open, but could have maybe made some tight window throws. Felt like he was getting pressured. There was a couple times where he got sacked. There was one in particular where it took the team out of field goal position. He had a 15-yard loss on a sack, which has, of course, been an issue for him in his early NFL career. But what I noticed from Caleb is a little bit more erratic nature in his accuracy, more erratic nature in terms of his decision-making, and overall just staying with the structure of an offense. I feel like Jaden does a better job. He's he's like, I think, more composed. He knows where to go with the ball. He knows when to not make a mistake or like try to avoid a mistake. And I think a big difference between the two is like Jayden just has this special elusiveness, this special ability to elude and be elusive and be quick and be kind of like slippery that I think Caleb has to a certain degree, but it definitely hasn't translated in the same way that I feel like Jayden's has. Like Jayden's quickness and speed is definitely showing up in each and every game, and it showed up through the first few quarters of the game. I will say where I thought Jayden did struggle in this game was when the Bears played tighter coverage and a little bit more like man coverage almost. He did tend to struggle in those third down scenarios where he would be a little off with some of his throws. And I did feel like the Bears defense actually played a pretty strong game in this one, honestly. Like, despite the 481 yards, I thought they did a good job. Like, they forced 5 punts in the game, and they forced a bunch of field goals, right? They didn't allow any touchdowns except for the Hail Mary, which is absolutely insane, right? But the Bears, they go 2 for 12 on third down. They're 0 for 1 on fourth down. I mean, again, just more third down, fourth down struggles from teams across the NFL. They punted 7 times. They struggled mightily in the first half. And I think a lot of it had to do with Caleb. I think a lot of it had to do with his inaccuracies, the inability to get the ball downfield accurately. I felt like they didn't really get the run game going until the third quarter, where DeAndre Swift was able to hit a couple big runs. Like, he had a 56-yard run in the game, which was a nice explosive touchdown down the left sideline. But overall, I look at these two teams, and I think they're fairly even. Honestly, I was impressed by the Bears in the second half, and I felt like after they scored the touchdown that they should have won the game because they were just in that same position, and they let it slip where they fumbled the ball at the 1-yard line. And you could argue the Bears were the better team because of how dominant they were in the third and the fourth quarter. But then at the same time, I thought the Commanders should have had a bigger lead in the first half to the degree where maybe the game is never really in jeopardy. But then at the end, they're able to slip through and get a win through a Hail Mary, which it was just an absolute incredible scene to watch. Dan Quinn running onto the field. Just Noah Brown, like catching the ball and then acting like nothing happened. How often do you see that? He catches the ball on a deflection pretty calmly, like he's been there before and has caught a Hail Mary before. And he kind of just, it's like, yeah, I caught it. Like, we're in the end zone, touchdown. And then everyone else is freaking out around him. That's pretty cool. That's probably what I would do, to be honest. Like, but yeah, that was pretty dope. That was pretty crazy. Hail Marys, man, this year, we've had a couple of them. That one, though, to end a game is absolutely wild. I do think the Bears are a team that I think they're going to be right there for a playoff spot. This could be a loss that actually really ends up hurting them, because now they're going to be 4-3 instead of 5-2, which in their division is huge. I mean, the Vikings look like they're slipping a little bit, but they still have been very good early in the year. The Packers and the Lions are arguably 2 of the best teams, if not the 2 best teams in their conference. So this division is just really tough to crack, and the Bears still have a pretty tough upcoming schedule. Meanwhile, the Commanders, they really just have the Eagles to deal with in their own division, and those games will pretty much determine who wins the division, and I think the other team is likely going to make a wild card spot, but who knows, really, who knows, especially with the depth of the NFC right now. I mean, we've got teams like the Cardinals at 4-4, teams like the Rams that could be pretty interesting down the stretch. Seattle's at 4-4 after getting hammered, which is the next game I want to talk about. We have, San Francisco, we'll see how they do tonight, and I already talked about it, so you're going to be kind of confused. The NFC South, you've got the Falcons and the Bucs that are still in contention there. The Bucs seem to be slipping. The Falcons seem to be taking that lead in the division. The Panthers are irrelevant, but there's still plenty of depth in this conference, right? So, yeah, the Commanders, the Bears, 18-15. My overall thoughts being this game could have went either way based on a tale of two halves. Bears, I thought, better team in the second half. Commanders, better team in the first half. Commanders, I think they've had the better quarterback. I think they also have the better offensive coordinator. I think they've got the scheme that has molded their quarterback better. I think Daniels is just playing with an unbelievable level of confidence. And I think the skills that have translated for Daniels have been elusiveness, have been the ability to be slippery and accurate, while I feel like Caleb's inability to get the ball downfield as effectively, his inability to be as consistently accurate and a tad more erratic is the reason why the Bears are not quite as happy as the Commanders are with Jaden Daniels. So, yeah, that was a weird, crazy, awesome game. Next up, let's talk about the Bills and the Seahawks. That's on the thumbnail. I thought this was the statement of the day. The Buffalo Bills, 31-10 in Seattle, an utterly dominant performance. The game did get a little shaky in the second quarter, but the Buffalo Bills, they, to me, look like a team that could win the Super Bowl. They look like a Super Bowl team, and it's through dominance on both sides of the ball. It's through a lack of mistakes, and it's through explosion, balance. They have a lot of different elements that I'm really falling in love with this team. Obviously, they have arguably the best player in the NFL in Josh Allen. They have an awesome running game. James Cook had a dominant performance, 17 carries, 111 yards, 6.5 yards per carry. And they were even able to finish this game with a strong rushing performance from their backup running backs as well. Cook had 2 touchdowns. But I was incredibly impressed by Keon Coleman, who had 5 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. Khalil Shakir, who had over 100 yards, if I'm not mistaken. And he also had, I think, 8 to 10 catches in the game. And they had 28 first downs. It felt like whenever the Bills needed a first down, they got the first down, whether through Josh Allen running on a designed run, James Cook running himself, Keon Coleman winning a one-on-one, Shakir underneath, Dalton Kincaid on a scramble drill. They just have so many options now. Just by adding Amari Cooper, who had a quiet game in this game, it feels like this team has been unlocked so much more because of the matchups that are now given to them, where it felt like before Amari Cooper, a lot of teams were able to put their best perimeter corner on Keon Coleman, kind of slow him and lock him down in single coverage. They were able to kind of double or, shadow Shakir in the middle of the field, and it was a lot on Josh Allen. Well, now you have to put the number 1 guy on Cooper, and that leaves a number 2 for Coleman, and a lot of these number 2s in the NFL aren't able to play with the ball skills that he's able to play with, which creates a mismatch, and it feels like Kincaid is getting better. Their run game is dominant, and I understand the Seahawks are overrated, and we discussed this throughout the week. Like, the Seahawks are incredibly overrated, but and they seemed lost without DK Metcalf offensively. But that being said, the Bills, like we said in the best bets, like we said in the picks, this is a different level of team than Seattle. And they thoroughly proved that, right? They were dominant in all facets, pass game, run game, defense, special teams. They were thoroughly dominant. 8 for 15 on third down. Seattle was 1 for 7. Seattle was 0 for 1 on fourth down. The Bills had 11 more first downs. The box score matched what happened on the field. 445 yards to 233 yards. They only had 1 sack, Buffalo, too. And their defense was dominant. Their coverage, you could tell early in the game. They were all over the money concepts of Seattle. They were all over the middle of the field. Geno had nowhere to go with the ball. The coverage for Buffalo was very tight and very, very sound. It felt like every time Geno would throw the ball, there was 2 guys collapsing on the guy that was about to catch the ball. Even when they were completed, it was difficult. So I'm not really going to throw this game on Geno. I don't think Geno was his best here. I don't think he was great. But the inability to run the ball was also a statement by Buffalo. The way to beat Buffalo is to run the ball, and Seattle had 32 total rushing yards in this game. Zach Charbonnet had 1.3 yards per carry. Every good run Kenneth Walker had was almost a broken play. It was really that dominant from Buffalo. So 38 minutes of possession. They just totally dominated this game. 31-10. Allen, again, superb. He does end up throwing his first interception of the season, but he does put up 2 passing touchdowns on the day as well, and over 100 passer rating. It was raining. It was tricky conditions. I thought early in the game, Seattle had a chance where fourth down, they get stopped, I believe, on 1 4th down, where they snapped. I want to say one of them was... Okay, so I think one of them, there was 2 series early in the game by Seattle. One of them, the ball was snapped over Geno's head, which resulted in, it was 3rd and goal, I think. It got snapped over Geno's head, which resulted in a loss of 15 to 20 yards, which resulted in a field goal. So it was a bit fortunate for Buffalo in that situation. The other one was a 4th down where they got stopped. So Buffalo was able to make 2 crucial plays early in the game defensively. that were able to turn the tide. And then it felt like Seattle just couldn't move the ball after that. And Buffalo just possessed the living crap out of the football for like 2 quarters straight. And the place they took control of the game was that final 8 or that middle 8 of the game where they were able to score before halftime. Dalton Kincaid scores like with 15 seconds left in the first half. And then they go down in the third quarter and they get a field goal. So that puts them up, and they go on a pretty long drive too. They go on like a 7-minute drive at the beginning of the third quarter and they get a field goal. So it's 7-3. Then Kincaid scores, it's 14-3. Then they go up 17-3 thanks to the field goal. They get a couple stops from their defense. James Cook scores, it's 24-3. Then they score, it's 31-3. So yeah, they just completely, like, even in the second half, where they led 14-3 at halftime, they won 17-7 in the second half. That's a thorough beating by Buffalo. So statement game. I actually think that Buffalo, this might be, when they're all healthy, I think if they could make an addition or two, I truly do believe this could be the most complete Buffalo team we've ever seen. Because I think it's an experienced Buffalo team. I think it's a better Josh Allen. I think it's the best offensive line Josh Allen's ever had. I think it's a very deep receiving core, although I don't think it's maybe as peak levels of explosiveness as they used to have with peak Stephon Diggs. I think that they're balanced through their running game, the flexibility of having tight ends to throw to, running backs to throw to, receivers to throw to with different matchups. Defensively, I think they're very solid. The passing game, I think they're top 10 in the NFL defensively. I think run defense is their biggest weakness. If they could add a safety and or a defensive lineman, I think that could be huge, right? They don't have Von Miller right now. They don't have Matt Milano right now. So those are going to be huge additions. They didn't have Bernard in this game, so they were still able to beat down Seattle without those players. So I am very, very impressed with Buffalo. I think they're going to be very hard to beat this year in the playoffs because I think they now have a team that actually is suited to play in bad weather, which in this game, this was not ideal weather. This was raining. So, I mean, it was Seattle, Vancouver weather. I know it well. So, yeah, the Bills were able to dominate. The next story I want to talk about is Jameis Winston, man. Famous Jameis has returned. You only get one opportunity, bro. One opportunity. Mom's spaghetti moment for Jameis Winston. The man continues to be. I thought he cut like one of the best promos of the NFL season after the game. Straight up, no expression, just praising God, bro. Going out there and absolutely like just unbelievable stuff from Jameis Winston. 29-24. Jameis, man, I've been saying all year, like people been laughing at me, whatever. You guys can laugh at me all you want. You Deshaun Watson, I don't even want to say it. You Deshaun Watson jabronis is what I'm going to call you. You bunch of dumb asses, okay? I told you Deshaun Watson absolutely blows. The first game that Deshaun Watson does not play for the Cleveland Browns, the quarterback that replaces him named Jameis Winston goes 27 for 41 for 334 yards and 3 touchdowns and 115 passer rating. And that's not only because Deshaun Watson is ass, but there's a few things to Jameis that I like. First of all, he's experienced. He's a former first overall pick that won a national championship in college, and he's had some success in the NFL. Secondly, he's got a big arm, and he's aggressive, and that fits the Cleveland offense. Third, he's a great personality, and players like him, which makes players around him play better, including his defense in this game for about 90% of the game played stellar. And I think that just has a trickle-down effect on his entire team. Meanwhile, I think this was the first game in a while where we saw some of the Ravens' deficiencies pop up. I'm not going to panic about the Ravens in this game. This is a divisional opponent on the road with a new quarterback in a must-win game, and I think this was a really big trap game for Baltimore because this is an opponent that was hungry for a win, and they finally got an opportunity to prove that Deshaun Watson is a jabroni, and they were able to do that. So I think that was a bit of a trap game. But, you know, looking at the stats, I don't think they do it justice in terms of how good Cleveland's defense was. Because at the end of the day, Baltimore has 387 yards. A lot of these came in the fourth quarter. 263 passing yards for Lamar Jackson. 289 total, includes sacks on here. 2 for 10 on third down, 22 first downs for Baltimore, which was actually the same amount of Cleveland. But here's the difference. Cleveland, 8 for 15 on third down compared to Baltimore, 2 for 10. Against Lamar Jackson, that's very impressive. 0 for 2 on fourth down. With Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, that's extremely impressive. And one of them came at the very end of the game. It was kind of like a panic have to score play. So it was really 0 for 1 plus 1. Cleveland also had 3 sacks in the game on Lamar. Cleveland also had 4 punts forced, and they limited the Ravens' possession. The Ravens didn't have 30 minutes of possession, which is fairly rare for the Baltimore Ravens. Cleveland also was able to have 400 total yards in this game, and that was without running the ball very effectively. Nick Chubb only had 52 total yards and 3.3 yards per carry. They really did this through the air. I thought Cedric Tillman played really well every time, I tuned in the game, every third down or something he showed up. 7 catches, 99 yards. Zay Flowers did have a really good second half, and I kind of wonder why he was not more involved in the first half. 7 catches on 12 targets for 115 yards, 16.4 yards per carry. Yards per catch. He needs to be a guy that I think they involve right away in a game. They need to try to target him. And I feel like the drop back passing game of the Ravens is way too scattered. It's way too reliant on Lamar just running around and making plays. I still feel that way. I think their offense is 100% running the ball and play action. And I think they're the best team in football when they're running the ball well and they play from ahead. I think they are pretty much unstoppable because you have Lamar Jackson and you have Derrick Henry. Who's going to stop those guys when they need 10 yards and they have 4 plays to do it? Even as good as the Lions are in that situation, they don't even come close to as good as the Ravens as a pure rushing play from ahead football team. It's just so hard to stop these guys. But when you're playing an even game and when you're playing from behind, the Ravens are exposable. And I think you've got to be able to throw the ball on the Ravens because that's their biggest deficiency defensively. Their quarterback pass rush is not very good. They had 2 sacks in the game, but how many attempts did JAMEIS have? 41. So Cleveland had technically their backup quarterback, and they were fully aware that they needed to throw the ball a bunch of times. And they were able to throw the ball 41 times, 334 yards, and only get sacked twice. And Cleveland's offensive line, you got to give them credit. They're a little bit healthier now. They played much better in this game overall. Tillman caught the touchdown to take the lead, and it was a clutch drive by JAMEIS, man. I mean, it looked like the Ravens were going to win. I think they were up 24-23 with a minute, 2 minutes left, 2:41 left, something like that. And Cleveland drives the field. JAMEIS makes a couple big third down completions, Tillman being involved, and then JAMEIS goes for the kill with a 38-yard touchdown to Tillman down the right side of the field for the score. David Njoku was also a beast in this game. He had a 23-yard touchdown. He had a couple really nice catches. One on the sidelines that was really impressive for a tight end. Nelson Aguilar had one of Lamar's touchdowns. Derrick Henry, though, I mean, there was a part in the game, the first couple of quarters where I didn't even think he was involved. I didn't even know if he was playing. The second, third quarter, I was like, is he even playing in this game? Because when Baltimore is trailing, it takes Derrick Henry out of the game. It eliminates him from the game plan. Justice Hill is the running back in that situation. So that was huge, in my opinion, for the Browns to play from ahead, to play stifling defense. I thought they played good coverage down the field. They played aggressive up front. They were able to slow down the run early. They were able to get the lead, and they were able to play with command, which is what you need to do against the Ravens. It's what I've been saying all year. It's why I'm still suspect about the Ravens when it comes to playoffs. When teams can play them like this, that's when they're going to have problems. Now, I think they need to make some trades. I think they need to make some trades for pass rushers. I think they need to think about their secondary because their pass defense right now, they need to think about defensive coordinator. I know that you can't trade for a defensive coordinator, but they need to make something happen here because their defense is going to be backbreaking against good quarterbacks, right? If you have to play Josh Allen again, if you have to play even Patrick Mahomes the way that he's playing, which is terrible, if you have to play, CJ Stroud in the playoffs, I feel like this is going to be difficult for you guys to overcome. Just your defense, you're not built as the Ravens to give up 29 points and still be able to win. As good as Lamar is, it's just not a sustainable way to win playoff games. And this was against a divisional rival on the road. I get it. It's a tough loss. But that's 3 losses on the year now for the Ravens. They're 5-3. I mean, we talk about this team like they're 8-0 or whatever, but now they've dropped this game, and Lamar and Henry maybe move slightly down in the MVP conversation, but I still think Lamar's playing great. I still think Lamar's playing great football, and I thought that Lamar honestly played pretty good, but I felt like the second half, it was far too reliant on him just running. Like, it felt like their only offense in the second half was him running in circles and trying to run for big plays and scramble, and that's not good enough. You've got to be able to drop back, throw the football with rhythm, with timing, and pick up first downs through good receiver play, good drop back pass, Lamar actually getting the ball out fast to his first or second read. You can't just rely on scramble drill plays when you're behind and when you're on third down. So 29-24, fucking Jameis Winston, baby. I fucking love it. Let's go. I told you, motherfuckers. Jameis Winston, baby. Sorry for the French. All right, Texans and the Colts. Let's talk about Texans and the Colts. 23-20. This one I was watching kind of in and out, okay? Remember, guys, this is right after Sunday. I'm going off pure memory here. This was once again another Texans game where I thought their defense played great, and I thought their run game played pretty well, but I thought that their passing game was, again, extremely underwhelming, and it had 99% of the problem being their offensive line. Like, there was third downs where they couldn't block. There were plays where CJ Stroud's running for his life, trying to extend plays, and nobody's open. And now they could potentially have lost Stephon Diggs for the entire season. It was a non-contact knee injury. That's not good. Maybe the Texans look into trading for a receiver as well. That could happen, but they do have plenty of depth. I don't think Diggs is the greatest loss in the world. Once they get Nico Collins back, I think Tank Dell's showed enough to be the wide receiver too. But they're going to have to replace that, obviously. But I think the biggest thing they need, the offensive line play, the coordinating, this coaching from the offensive line, that might be the Achilles heel. We talked about the Achilles heel for the Ravens, pass coverage, drop back pass, things like that. For the Texans, it's 100% the offensive line, because the defensive line is fantastic, and they're playing without Mario Edwards, who I think is a really underrated player. Their defense overall, very, very good in this game. Anthony Richardson was fucking terrible. He is so bad at football. 10 completions for 10 completions on 32 attempts. And every time I turn the game on, the guy is soaring the ball 80 yards down the field incomplete. Like, what type of passing offense is that? Just throwing the ball up to no man's land, throwing the ball up to nobody. Like, are you kidding me? And guys, I'm sorry I'm throwing these F-bombs out there, but this is truly how I feel, man. Like, Anthony Richardson should not be playing on an NFL field. A 48 passer rating. 10 completions on 32 attempts. That's pathetic. Like, that's pathetic, man. Absolutely pathetic. Like, you cannot roll a quarterback. I felt like in the first half, if Joe Flacco was playing, they would have been leading by 2 touchdowns. I swear to you. I swear, I said it on my live chat, and you guys that were there back me up on this. Like, the Colts would have been winning by 2 touchdowns. If not for Anthony Richardson just throwing the ball every drop back 60 yards down the field, like over people's heads. Like, what is that passing offense? It's so incoherent. It's terrible. Jonathan Taylor actually had a good day, 5.3 yards per carry. It was their best source of offense. Josh Downs had a long touchdown, 109 yards on the day total, and a touchdown, which was a 69-yard touchdown. And Josh Downs is a really good player. Shout out to Drake May's buddy. But Richardson is bad. Like, and Stroud's statistics were actually pretty good. 25 for 37, 295, 285, and a touchdown. But I felt like every time I turned the game on and every time I was watching it, it was just, it's like what the Colts are doing, but it's just with a better quarterback. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just very spotty. There's just not a lot of rhythm to it. I felt like in the second half, the Texans were able to maybe like throw the ball more. Like, I like to see Stroud have 37 attempts, because it means they're letting him throw on early downs more often, get the ball out quick, like get rid of the ball, like get in rhythm, throw the ball short. I thought that they did that better in the third quarter. That's something that I did notice, like the second half. The first half, they were up 17-10. But I felt like I liked the rhythm in terms of upping the passing attempts in that second half. So 23-20, Texans win. And honestly, it pretty much comes down to Texans pass rush, once again, 5 sacks. Their run game, once again, pretty solid. Stroud being superhuman. 21 first downs, Colts only 17. Colts struggled to move the ball. They struggled to get first downs. They had like 5 3-and-outs, I want to say, off the top of my head. They punted 6 times. They had 9 penalties. And the Texans did cut down their penalties. Only 5 on the day. There was also a fumble loss by the Colts, and there was an interception by the Colts. So turnover battle, Texans won that as well. Texans won the possession battle, 35-24. Like I said, 3-and-outs, 3-and-outs, 3-and-outs. And for the Colts, if you're thinking about the way that your team should be, it should be a ball possession offense. It should be a team that stays on the field. It should be a team that converts long drives, right? Not a team that's throwing for 60-yard chunks and living and dying based on that. That is not a good football team. That just breeds inconsistency. So I want the Texans to be more consistent, especially on third down. I want better first and second down play calling to allow them to be better on third down. I want them to chief it up a little bit. Throw the ball short, get 3 yards, throw the ball in a screen, get 4 yards. Like, just get efficient gains on early downs. I want less of this 1 yard negative play garbage on early downs, and let's save CJ Stroud from third and long, because clearly the offensive line is trash in those situations. They can't pick up blitzes. Even Gus Bradley blitzed them. That's bad, right? The Green Bay Packers beat the Jacksonville Jags 30-27 in a dramatic game because Jaden Daniels. Jordan Love once again got hurt. And the Patron bet on this one was to win at half and to win at the end. And ultimately, we pulled it off. And it was a very good week on Patreon so far, leading up to Sunday Night Football, which we'll see what happens. But the Packers, man, I felt like they were able to persevere. This is a sign of a team that I think is flawed. And definitely, I thought they could beat the Jags by more than a field goal and barely survive with a game-winning drive at the end. But you've got to give them credit for being able to go from starting quarterback with the lead to backup quarterback, losing in the game, then coming back and winning. And they're able to, win this game, I think, on the back of their running game, because Josh Jacobs really started just running the ball a lot in the second half. Once Jordan Love went down, Malik Willis only actually completed 4 passes out of 5 attempts for 56 yards and a touchdown. And one of the big schemed up plays was to, I think, Wicks down the left sideline. It set up the game-winning field goal to Carlson, and that was a big chunk gain. Otherwise, Willis didn't really have a lot of yards on his attempts other than that play. But Jacobs had 25 carries for 127 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5.1 yards per carry. And Green Bay's defense, once again, had a couple big plays, an interception in the game. They also had a fumble recovery, and they also had 1 for 9 on third down. They held Jacksonville 1 for 9 on third down. Jacksonville did pick up a 4th down conversion. It is actually pretty miraculous that Jacksonville was able to win this game. Part of it is an interception that Jordan Love threw in the red zone, which saved some points. Part of it was, like later in the game in the second half, they were able to steal some momentum. And, Trevor Lawrence did have 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 21 for 32. Brian Thomas still had 3 catches for 60 and a touchdown. Tank Bigsby still looked good, 18 for 78, 4.3 yards per carry. But Jacksonville, like, statistically speaking, not too impressive here. Like, the Packers, more yards by a good margin. Packers were only sacked once. Packers, they both punted 5 times. Packers only had 3 penalties. Jacksonville had 8. Packers had more time of possession due to their running game. Packers had more first downs. Packers clearly deserved to win. It was just kind of one of those games where Packers probably should have won by more, but because of the kind of nature of their quarterback being in, out, then like in again and then out again, Malik Willis had to come in, and then he saved the day at the end. But Jacksonville, I definitely think, is a little bit underrated just because I think their offense is very explosive. They've got an explosive running back in Tank Bigsby, an explosive rushing attack. They've got an explosive downfield passing attack thanks to Brian Thomas. Christian Kirk makes a couple plays. Evan Ingram scores a touchdown. They've got enough weapons to really get down the field and come back in a hurry and make things interesting against teams. And we even saw that against New England last week. So Jacksonville, if they had half a defense, they'd probably be pretty solid, but Yeah, they go to 2-6. They'll be sellers at the deadline. Packers are 6-2, still a flawed team, but surviving, finding ways to win. Malik Willis, legit, man. Malik Willis, I think he's only 4 for 5, 4 for 5, right? Like, and a touchdown, but he's so far when he's played well. Like, he's executed the offense. He's been accurate. He's been mobile. He avoids negative plays. He's played smart, right? He plays kind of like Justin Fields without the draft capital or, people kind of recognizing who he is because of Ohio State and stuff, right? A smaller school guy. But I think Malik Willis is like every bit as good as a Justin Fields. So I think he deserves a chance to get a start somewhere. Tucker Kraft also had 3 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. Another good game for him. He's like the top 4 tight end in fantasy. So shout out to him. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed with the result of the Packers only winning by 3, but they end up finding a way to do it without Jordan Love. It does appear that Jordan Love is going to only be out for just a smidgen of time, or maybe not at all. It's just it's a minor injury, so hopefully that stays, but it's kind of concerning now that Jordan Love has been out multiple times this year, and he's continuing to have to come back from injuries, because that leads to inconsistency. That leads to a lack of rhythm with your offense, a lack of building chemistry, a lack of building momentum with your team, with your offense, with your play calling, with all that sort of stuff, right? So, yeah, Green Bay over Jacksonville 30-27. The Detroit Lions blew the doors off the Tennessee Titans 52-14 in a very untraditional game. 52-14. And then we scroll down and we check out the stats. Tennessee had 6 more first downs and nearly 200 more yards in a game where they lost 52-14. What a weird game. What a weird game. Detroit had 3 first downs on 3rd down. They had 61 passing yards. And they won 52-14. Detroit had 1 sack. Tennessee had 4. Detroit had 5 punts in the game. Detroit had 24 minutes of possession to Tennessee's 35, and they won 52-14. Why did they win 52-14? Well, 1, their run game wasn't half bad. They had some explosive rushes in the game, 164 total rushing yards. Jahmyr Gibbs was a superstar again, 11 carries, 127 yards, 11.5 yards per carry. Now, what did they also have? They had Khalif Raymond throwing a passing touchdown. They had Khalif Raymond returning a punt for a touchdown. They had, some pretty good special teams overall. And they had multiple turnovers from the Tennessee Titans. Mason Rudolph started at quarterback. Will Levis was out, and the same thing proceeded. Fumbles, 2. Interceptions, 2. Tennessee gave the ball away consistently and allowed Detroit to capitalize and win the game handily. Not the most impressive outing, honestly, by the Detroit Lions offense, but they didn't really need to do anything, to be fair. Jared Goff had 12 completions for 85 total yards and 3 touchdowns, and that was basically all they needed. So that's just the brief recap, basically, of Lions-Titans. Titans are awful. They are a horrendous football team. They should have a top 3 pick in the NFL draft. Their defense still played actually pretty well when they were on the field. They were put in terrible positions. Calvin Ridley at least had a good statistical game, 10 catches, 143 yards. That was nice, for people that have him in fantasy and stuff. But the Titans, man, are an absolute joke. They should be sellers at the deadline. I wonder if the Lions will be buyers on any of their players. Harold Landry would be one I would be looking out for. Again, though, I thought that actually early in the game, Tennessee was moving the ball. Right before halftime, they should have scored a touchdown. They got to the 1-yard line. They got stuffed on 4th down. So Tennessee had opportunities to make this game competitive early. They just were not able to. Turnovers, special teams, bad field position, just made the game an absolute blowout. And Detroit, they did their Detroit stuff. They did their trick plays. They did their fun stuff in the 4th quarter up by 40 points. I hate that stuff personally. Even when I played in sports, I wouldn't care. If we won the game by 1, Well, to be fair, sometimes I would care. But, like, honestly, when a game was over, a game was over. Like, there's no style points. You want to keep your guys healthy. Like, why are we running trick plays? Like, I don't really like that stuff from Detroit, to be honest with you. And I got a new Detroit little statue here. So we got some Lions representation. I just got to figure out where to put it. I just got it on the back seat here. But, you know, Detroit, one of the best teams in the league right now, top 3 team in the league right now. I would just say, like, get rid of the wacky stuff at the end of games in the fourth quarter up by 40 points. Like, we don't need that. We don't need that. Okay? We don't need it, bro. Right beside the cheese head, I got the lion statue. So I just banged my knee on the table. That hurt a little bit. But we're okay. We're going to sustain. We're going to keep it going. We're going to keep it rolling. So Detroit, 52-14. Shout out to their running game. Shout out to a good special teams effort in that one. Atlanta Falcons beat the Bucs 31-26 by 5 points. This was a bit of a shootout, especially early in the game. And, you know, you look at first half was 24-17, and it stayed 24-17 for quite some time until the late third quarter, where Bijan Robinson was able to score a touchdown, and that made it 31-17. And then ultimately the Bucs just had to fight their way back into the game. They scored 9 to make it 31-26, but ultimately that was not good enough. Actually, 2 of the points resulted in a fumble for a safety. So that was where they got 2 points. That's why they had 9, because people would be wondering why they would want 9 points when they're down 14. Anyways, yeah, but one of them was a safety. Now, what stood out to me for the Falcons, once again, run game was solid. Kyle Pitts was fantastic. He had some big plays in this game. Early in the game, he had a 4th down conversion for a touchdown. Darnell Mooney had a great, strong game. He scored a deep touchdown in this game. That was 30-yard touchdown from Cousins. Cousins was on point, 23 for 29, 276, 4 touchdowns, 146.9 passer rating. On point, deep down the field, underneath, you know, finding his targets one-on-one. The Bucs, I thought, challenged Atlanta a little bit more in this game in terms of, like, man coverage, in terms of, like, just being more aggressive, because they know that they can't really play zone right now and they can't really cover in space, and they're letting up way too many completions. And I thought they were a little bit more aggressive, and it didn't really lead to success, but that's where Cousins was able to take advantage of it. Baker Mayfield also had a pretty solid game. He did have more mistakes than Cousins, which could have been the deciding factor, but he still had 37 completions on 50 attempts for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns, despite the 2 picks. Cade Otton, 9 receptions for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns on National Tight End Day. The 2 tight ends scored 2 touchdowns, which is 4 touchdowns for tight ends on National Tight End Day. Tampa did finish with more first downs, 24-20. On third down, both teams were efficient. Atlanta hitting at 50%. Tampa was actually above that, 9 for 14. Atlanta was 2 for 2 on fourth down. Tampa 1 for 2. 432 total yards for Tampa, 394 for the Falcons. Now, I think the biggest difference really is the turnovers. Like, the Bucs have turnovers, 2 interceptions, a fumble. Meanwhile, the Falcons do not. On top of that, I would just say the Falcons were able to... Hold on. I feel like there was a 4th down early in this game where Tampa didn't get it. I think there was a 4th down in this game where that also turned the tide in this game. Because it was 7-7 at the end of the first. Then it was 14-7 Tampa. Rachaad White touchdown on a little swing pass. Then Kyle Pitts scored his 2nd touchdown. That was actually a really nice play, 49 yards down the field. I think he broke a couple tackles. He scored. Then Darnell Mooney scored to make it 21-14. Then there was 2 field goals. Then the Falcons pulled away with a Bijan touchdown in the third quarter. Bijan had 63 yards in the game. I think this is what Atlanta should have done. This is what Atlanta did, right? They came out, they went to Tampa. They should have won this game. They did win this game. That's all I can really say about them, is like, it wasn't the prettiest. There wasn't a ton of style points to this victory. Sure, did they have a multi-score lead at one point? Yes. Did they let Tampa back in it to a certain degree? Sure. But they still secured the win. They won by 5. I think they finished it. They closed it at the end with their offense. And they needed this win, like point blank period. Tampa didn't have Mike Evans. Tampa didn't have Chris Godwin. They still scored. They still moved the ball, but their defense does disaster. Their defense can't stop the pass. Their defense can't cover. Their defense can't rush the quarterback. They can't do anything right on defense. And their offense just doesn't have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, which means it's really hard to win a shootout. And I broke that down on my picks. We talked about it. Like, that's why we picked Atlanta, right? So Atlanta goes on the road. They get 2 victories. Now they sweep the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this season, which is massive for the playoff race, massive for the divisional race. Atlanta's in firm control of this division, despite the records being pretty much identical for these teams. Atlanta's 5-3, Tampa's 4-4. They do have a game edge in terms of record, but the 2 games that they won against Tampa is going to be absolutely critical down the stretch. Tampa's also reeling a little bit. They play, I think, the Chiefs next week. Then after that, they play the Niners coming off their bye with Christian McCaffrey. So yeah, Tampa's in a really difficult spot. Meanwhile, Atlanta, I think, plays a pretty competitive team next week, if I'm not mistaken. I think they play Dallas. They play Dallas next week? Yes. That should be an interesting game, just because I could see that game being a bit like this Tampa game where Dallas is able to move the ball and make it a bit of a shootout. But again, Atlanta should be able to move the ball pretty effectively against that defense as well. But the overall story, it was Atlanta more control than the first game. I thought Tampa deserved to win the first game in Atlanta. They weren't able to come up with the win. Atlanta was able to out-clutch the Bucs in certain situations. Bad decisions by Todd Bowles at the end of that game. And then Atlanta clutches through in that game. And in this game, they get the lead. They have less turnovers. They have more control. Their defense makes a couple more plays in big spots. And Tampa just doesn't have the weaponry, and Baker doesn't have enough around him to really make that happen. So 31-26 Falcons. Next up, Philadelphia Eagles, 37-17 in I would say a shocking result. The game was a little bit closer than 37-17. It got a little bit out of hand in the fourth quarter where Philly scored 10 points with 4 minutes left in the game. So it was really like a 27-17 type of game. And honestly, early in the game, it was kind of a little bit of a back and forth type contest. And what's crazy about this, statistically speaking, is Cincinnati's offense actually felt like it was moving really well. They were 10 for 13 on third down. They were 0 for 1 on fourth down later in the game, which ended up kind of allowing the game to get out of hand. I think it was on their own side of the field, which allowed Philly to score another touchdown. But Cincy had a lot of third down conversions. They didn't punt the entire game. They threw an interception, and they got stopped on fourth down. So they really only had the ball 2 times where they got stopped. Maybe they fumbled as well. Maybe 3 times. Okay, don't quote me on that. But Philly's offense was equally as destructive, maybe even more dominant. Philly's offense was just, I thought this was one of Hurts' better games. Just in terms of 16 for 20, 236 and a touchdown. Not even statistically, but just the way he was throwing the ball outside the numbers. He was hitting a lot of comebacks, a lot of curls, a lot of deep outs, down the sideline throws to Devontae Smith. They had some catch and runs to Devontae Smith, some big plays to A.J. Brown. Saquon ran the ball effectively. Hurts had a few really nice runs. Hurts had 2 rushing touchdowns. 1 7 yards out, 1 was a tush push. Joe Burrow, I thought, played mostly really well, especially early in the game. 26 for 37, 234, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The Bengals did struggle to run the ball, I think, a little bit in this game. Chase Brown, 12 for 32, 2.7, and he felt like he was the more effective rusher than Zach Moss, who had a dreadful game, in my opinion. Jamar Chase had a solid game, 9 for 54 and a touchdown, but that's not a high enough yards per reception. Mike Gesicki was awesome in this game, in my opinion. They really did miss T. Higgins near the end of the game for another option to go to. And like I said, the run game was pretty bad. I think the difference could have just been that the Eagles were able to run the ball a bit better than the Bengals. Saquon, 22 for 108. And then the way that Hurts was throwing the ball really kind of stretched the Bengals defense out, because I think they came into the game thinking that they needed to resort to stop the run and they were going to take their chances on the outside. And they just didn't win the matchups on the outside consistently enough to really get away with that. So they forced Hurts to beat them, and Hurts kind of beat them in this game, to be honest. And that's fair enough, right? The Bengals, though, again, they just feel like a team I think they're a solid team. I think, honestly, I think they're definitely above average. I think this game was closer than the score. I just think that their defense is not quite it. And their offense without T. Higgins certainly takes a huge step back. And like I said in the BLV versus consensus, like if Devontae Smith, or sorry, not Devontae Smith, if T. Higgins is not playing, I'm picking the Eagles. Like it was kind of that simple, right? That it's just so much to the Bengals is having those two receivers on the team, on the field. Burrow being able to pick his matchups, Burrow being able to be, really precise with those two guys. And, then Mike Gesicki and others become third, fourth, fifth options on the team. Then their run game opens up because you have those two vertical threats on the outside. But at the end of the day, you look at Cincinnati and they don't even punt in the entire game and they still lose 37-17. That's pretty embarrassing at the end of the day. You don't punt in the game and you lose by 20. This is the second game this season the Bengals have lost without punting the ball. So, yeah, Eagles, it's a nice victory. It's a good victory. I thought their defense in the second half really played well. I thought their secondary flew around. Cooper DeJean had a really nice stop on Jamar Chase on fourth down. I thought their run defense was stellar the entire game. I thought Darius Slay was in the vicinity on a lot of plays. I think that Vic Fangio just has this defense playing hard, playing, in the right spots. I don't think they're like the most talented defense in the world. I think they've got talent, but they're not like a top 5 most talented defense. But they're definitely like they're flying around. They're playing faster. They're playing better. So Eagles defense stands up in the second half. Jalen Hurts stands up in the whole game. And the two biggest areas of question for the Eagles kind of won them this game, which is rather surprising in my opinion. Next up, the Arizona Cardinals beat the Miami Dolphins 28-27. This was a result that I'm not shocked by, but I also kind of was expecting the Dolphins to win at the same time. I thought the Cardinals would keep it close, but I thought that ultimately the Dolphins would be able to win it. Tua came back in this game. Kyler Murray, he had to answer the questions about, okay, how is he going to play post Call of Duty, right? That was the big narrative going into this game. Call of Duty came out. How's Kyler going to play? Early in the game, Miami looked like the old Miami. They go up 10-0 in the first quarter, and it looks like Miami is going to be dominant in a win in this game. And then all of a sudden, we get to the second half, and the Cardinals dominated the second half. They scored 21 points in the second half, and Miami scored 14. And that ultimately was the end of the game. Kyler played really well, though. 26 for 36, 307, 2 touchdowns through the air. James Conner really didn't do a lot. 20 attempts for 53 yards, 2.7 yards per carry. He did have a touchdown. Marvin Harrison had a great game, including his touchdown reception where he routed up Jalen Ramsey and embarrassed him. 6 catches for 111 yards and a touchdown. We did have a Tyreek sighting, 6 catches for 72 yards. Jalen Waddle didn't have as much impact as I would have hoped. Miami continues to be a little bit awkward in terms of their play calling. Their run game continues to be very hit or miss. Very explosive, but very negative at the same time. A lot of horizontal runs that rather go for big gains or losses, which really puts their offense in a difficult position. I think they call too many conservative short screen passes, which is also what Durkheim thought watching the game. I feel like they need to get Tyreek and Waddle more involved more quickly, just get them the ball. I also feel like awkwardly, like Raheem Mostert kind of, I don't know if he gets the ball too much, but maybe just in the red zone. But I don't know, like Devon Achane definitely should get the ball more than 10 times. He had 9.7 yards per carry. I don't know why he's only getting 9 or 10 carries in a game. But that being said, both teams had 22 first downs. Miami was actually 11 for 15 on third down. They had 377 total yards to Arizona's 389, so pretty identical there. Miami only punted twice, but Arizona only punted 3 times. There was no penalties in this game, only 6 penalties. The Miami had 4 fumbles according to the stats. I don't know how many of them were lost in the game, but there was a dramatic play in the game where Tua, the ball was snapped over his head, and Tua recovered the ball in the end zone, resulting in a safety. So that was a huge play in the game. They had to punt the ball away, of course, after the safety to the Cardinals, and the Cardinals end up scoring. Marvin Harrison scores. That flips the entire game around, because at that point, the game was, 13, 20 to 10 for Miami. So the score was 20 to 10 for Miami, and then that snap fumble happens. It's 20 to 12. Then Arizona scores with Marvin Harrison, and the 2-point attempt fails. So it's 20 to 18. Then Miami actually goes down and scores again. So it's 27 to 18. And then somehow Arizona turns that into a touchdown for James Conner on the next drive after Raheem Mostert scores. And then Chad Ryland, the man, the myth, the legend, the man that got the Patriots Drake May by missing so many game-winning kicks for the Patriots last year, ends Miami's season. And at the end of the day, Miami is sitting at 2-5. Their record is awful. Arizona is somehow 4-4, which is the same record as Seattle and San Francisco. And they have a shot in this division all of a sudden, although I don't really think they kind of don't at the same time. But hey, mathematically, record-wise, they do. Miami, they're not making the playoffs. The problem is their defense is too inconsistent. Their offense, I feel like too many negative plays. Run game is spotty. Pass game just feels like the vibe is off. Tyreek and Waddle, they just are not as dominant as before. Tua, even statistically, 234 passing yards. That's not Miami to me. Against Arizona? Against Arizona? That's not good enough. So, yeah, disappointing effort for Miami. Season kind of on the line. Big spark game. It's at home. You can't lose that game. Multiple times this year, they've lost at home. It's kind of shocking to me. So Miami loses 28-27 to Arizona, able to make another crazy comeback and win a game. That's just Kyler Murray for you. So that was Cardinals-Dolphins. 26-8, the Chargers defeated the Saints. I didn't see much of this game other than Ladd McConkey had a freaking sick game. 6 catches for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. One was incredible in the back of the end zone late in the game, and one was a breakaway deep play. Herbert also had another statistical pretty good game, 279 yards and 2 touchdowns after a 300-yard day against the Cardinals, although he lacked the touchdowns. I would say that I don't really understand why the Saints continue to play Spencer Rattler over the other kid. I feel like the other kid's maybe a little bit more like Derek Carr, but I get why they're playing Rattler just because they spent the draft pick on him. Chris Olave, I thought, was one of the better players for the Saints, 8 for 14. I'd also say that the Saints defense played well early in the game, and they kept them in it for a long time. This game was 3-2 forever, it felt like. There was a safety There was a safety for the Saints, I think, that they got. And then the Chargers scored a field goal. So it was 3-2. Felt like for the entire second quarter. And then by the end of the second quarter, Dobbins scored a touchdown. And then in the second half, basically the Saints couldn't move the ball at all. You look at the stats, the Saints had 15 first downs. They were 2 for 16 on third down. They did end up with 366 yards, but pretty much a lot of garbage time. And 9 punts. You're not going to win a game with 9 punts. 7 penalties. 9 punts. I thought Chris Olave had a good game, though. Every time I was kind of watching it, it was rather him or Ladd McConkey that were making plays. Chargers struggled to run the ball against the Saints. They did better in that regard this week. New Orleans did. But Chargers get a win. Much needed after a loss on Monday night on a short week. 26-8. 4-3 are the Chargers. Okay. The Raiders and the Chiefs. 27-20. The Chiefs win. This was another game that I thought the Chiefs were not overly impressive. They did, once again, have an extremely high third down percentage. 12 for 16. But again, 16 third downs faced. That is their offense. They dink and dunk and dink and dunk and 3 yards of cloud of dust. That's what they do. 16 third downs, right? The Raiders' offense actually moved the ball better than I would have expected for a majority of the game, but they just made some critical errors. They threw an interception, I think. Oh, no, it was a fumble by Minshew. Either way, they had a big fumble. They had a fourth down at the 1 yard line of the Chiefs that they were not able to convert, and those two plays pretty much flipped the game, allowed the Chiefs to win. Mahomes did throw another interception near his own goal line, which the Chiefs defense ultimately bailed him out once again. I thought this was another game where the Chiefs defense pretty much bailed out their offense, and the defense pretty much allowed the Chiefs to control the game in the third, fourth quarter range where they took over a little bit. Kareem Hunt had a pretty bad day in terms of efficiency, 21 carries, 59 yards, 2.8 yards per carry. But the Raiders' rush offense, according to efficiency statistics, are the worst rushing offense in the millennium ever. Alexander Mattison had 1.1 yards per carry in this game, which is absolutely atrocious. I thought Jacoby Myers had a good game, 6 catches for 52 yards and a touchdown. He had some nice third down conversions early in the game, stuff like that. I thought Minshew didn't play awful. He just had that one back-breaking mistake. He was 24 for 30, 209, and 2 touchdowns. What else? Bowers was kind of inconsistent. He started off the game well, ended the game all right, but this was Travis Kelce's best game of the year with 10 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. He was making some big plays in the second half to move the chains, to convert, to get this offense going a little bit. But I thought their offense, once again, Kansas City's, was just not that great. 82 rushing yards, 252 passing yards. D-Hop made a couple plays here and there. Number 8, a little weird, but he's wearing number 8. The Chiefs did have 5 sacks on the Raiders. Raiders only had 1. And both teams only punted twice. So this was a game of the Raiders would move the ball a little bit, would get stopped, would make a mistake, or would get stopped on fourth down. The Chiefs, they kind of just did their Chief thing, whatever that is. And they won again, 27-20. Broncos beat the Panthers 28-14. The only notable thing about this game is the Panthers were leading 7-0. I thought they were going to win. The Broncos went up 21-7 in the end of the first half. Bo Nix had a great statistical game against a terrible defense, 284 yards and 3 touchdowns, probably his best game of his career. They were also 11 for 17 on third down and had 400 total yards. There were some crazy guys making touchdowns like Adam Troutman with a one-handed catch and Atkins, who I've never really heard of. Nix and McLaughlin were the other touchdown scorers. Jalen Coker, I almost said the other one, and Leggett scored the touchdowns like nobody, that like rather rookies or nobody anyone's ever heard of, scored all the touchdowns in this game. And the other thing is like Sean Payton was doing some crazy stuff at the end of the game where like Panther players were starting to like get really angry at him and like try to kill people. Like they almost tried to kill Cortland Sutton at the end of the game. So I don't know what Sean Payton's doing. But anyways, Panthers, I feel bad for them. I feel bad for their fans. They probably tuned in the game. They were up 7-0. They were probably expecting some sort of upset win. They were 12-point dogs. They still failed to cover. 28-14, Broncos win. They get another victory somehow. The Broncos are sitting at 5-3, which is absolutely insane. Insanity in my mind. Now this team has faced a couple easy opponents in a row. The Panthers and the Saints without like half their team is about as easy as it gets. So we'll see how the Broncos look. Next week, who do they play? They play the Ravens in Baltimore. That's a big test. So yeah, especially after the Ravens lost. That's going to be a major test for them. But their defense might be able to keep them in the game. I like how their defense is playing. Outside of that first touchdown, I thought they pretty well dominated as usual, as expected. So congratulations to the Broncos for being 5-3. And the final game, I don't think I talked about the New York Jets and the New England Patriots. Somehow the Patriots win this game 25-22. And I'm going to find the stat as to why I say somehow the Patriots won this game. Because this was the first game since 1940 in which a team scored 20-plus points, committed 0 turnovers, and held their opponent to under 250 yards of offense and lost. I'll say that again. The Jets lost a game in which they scored 20-plus points, committed 0 turnovers, held their opponent to under 250 yards. And what's weird about this is that the Patriots, it's not like they benefited from a ton of turnovers. They didn't have an interception. And if I'm not mistaken, they didn't force a fumble. I don't recall them forcing a fumble. No, I don't think so. The Jets had more first downs, 22-19. The Jets had barely any more rushing yards, but they did have more rushing yards. They did have more passing yards. They did have more total yards. They had more sacks. They had less punts. They did have more penalties, only by 5 yards in total, but 8 penalties. And they did have about the same time of possession. But the Patriots were surprisingly better on third down. They also converted a fourth down in the game to come back and win. The Patriots started off this game pretty well. First series of the game, if I remember correctly, they stopped the Jets. I think they stopped the Jets first. And then Drake May goes on a drive. He runs in a 17-yard touchdown. Drake May, when he played in this game, played really well, I thought. He was 3 for 6 for 23 yards passing, but he also ran pretty effectively. And even in the plays that were incomplete, he made some really impressive throws, and there was multiple drops, even when he was just in the game. But Drake May ends up leaving this game with a concussion, which is even more shocking that the Patriots won. Because Drake May, was kind of carrying the team before that. But it was weird because the Patriots they kind of played better. The other players, the O-line played better. The run game started running the ball better. The defense started playing without Drake May, which was kind of weird. But anyways, what was also weird about this game is I think there was a point where New England scored with Drake May, and then they punted, they didn't even get a first down. Because I did this game live. I'm trying to remember. They didn't even get a first down, 3 straight drives in a row. They couldn't move the ball. They couldn't even get a yard or a completion. They punted the ball 3 straight times in a row. The Jets led at halftime, 13-7, because Greg the Leg, of course, missed an extra point. But then the Patriots got the ball to start the second half, I think. No. What happened was Marcus Jones had a big punt return, which set up a Stevenson 3-yard touchdown for the Patriots to get the lead at 14-13. The Jets then took the lead 16-14 with a field goal from Greg Zuerlein. Then the Patriots took the lead 17-16, I think, with a field goal, if I'm not mistaken. Then, in the fourth quarter, the Jets got a touchdown from Allen 2 yards out. They failed the 2-point. That was with barely any time left, 2 minutes left. But because of the score, it was 22-16. Am I doing the math right? I don't even know where I'm at with the math. But regardless of that, okay, the Patriots won 25-22. All right? Stevenson scored the game-winning touchdown. And they got a 2-point conversion to make it a field goal lead. And then the Jets were not able to get into position for a field goal at the end. There was not enough time. They ran out of time. Few things in this game. Jets called 5 timeouts because of avoiding false starts, avoiding illegal procedures, avoiding, delay of games, okay? They called at least 4 timeouts for that. Aaron Rodgers was spotty. He had some good moments, but definitely when New England was able to blitz him and get some pressure on him and move him off his spot specifically, he was a little rattled, and he threw some bad inaccurate passes, throwaways, took a sack or 2, if I'm not mistaken. Just 1 sack, but it did feel like he was more pressured than just the 1 sack that he took. The Patriots, I thought, played much more man coverage in this game than they had been playing previously. Marcus Jones primarily covered Garrett Wilson, which was the most success that any Jet receiver had. Gonzo covered Devontae Adams very successfully. Garrett Wilson had a good game, 5 for 113. Okay, he beat Marcus a few times, but only 5 catches, which speaks to the lack of rhythm the Jets had. It was mostly explosive passes or running the football that got them going. Breece Hall had 16 carries for 80 yards, 5.0 yards per carry. New England didn't even run the ball well in this game. Stevenson only had 48 yards on 20 carries for 2.4 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. And it wasn't like Gibson ran the ball well and Hasty didn't even play. Drake May ran the ball well. Brissett made a couple runs. Stevenson made some timely, efficient runs when they needed to in short yardage, but none of them were really explosive. I mean, he maybe had 1 or 2 good runs at the end of the day. Kayshon Boutte made some clutch catches and some key drops as well. 3 catches, 46 yards. He made a big play at the end of the game on a slant where he was able to catch it and get it down to the 1-yard line. Demario Douglas was very quiet. Brissett targeted Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper like it was his day job. Like he knew it was National Tight End Day. He just kept spamming those 2 guys, especially Hunter Henry. Kendrick Bourne was pretty lousy in the game. I thought the Patriots, their corners, I think, were the reason they hung in on defense. Their pass rush, I wasn't too impressed by. Like, Keon White had a couple plays. I thought Caden Ellis played I think it's Caden Ellis, right? He played a Christian Ellis, maybe? I don't know. One of those 2. He played really, really well in this game. The linebacker, the new starting linebacker, new to the team this year. Is it Christian or Caden? I can't remember. I get those mixed up. But regardless, he played really well, I thought, in the game. I thought that, what else? Marcus Jones had a big return that was huge in the game. It sucked to see Drake May go out. I thought we were going to lose depressingly by a blowout. I don't know how we won this game. I honestly have no idea. Like, I really don't know. At the end of the day, this is one of the more confusing wins the Patriots have had in recent years. They were outgained by nearly 100 yards. They basically won 0 statistical categories outside of third down. They lost their starting quarterback, was their best player in the previous 2 games. I guess their kicking was better. Like, the Jets missed a field goal in the game. The Jets missed an extra point, which could have gave them the win at the end of the day, and they weren't able to do that. The Jets also started a bit slow on offense. Drake May got the Patriots the lead, which was key to the game. I don't know what even to say, but they both have the same record. They're both 2-6, and the Jets are a team that were expected to be a Super Bowl contender, a playoff team, a team that's making moves for Devontae Adams at the trade deadline, trying to get Hassan Reddick, firing their coach, making whatever move necessary to be a playoff team. Meanwhile, the Patriots want a first overall pick. They want a top 3 pick in the draft, and they're beating the Jets. So hopefully Drake May is back next week. They play the Titans. The Patriots might be able to be 3-6 next week because the Titans are awful. Now, as a Patriots fan, I would expect us to lose that game just because that's the way it goes. The Jets play, I think, a pretty tough opponent next week. I think the Jets play a team that I would probably expect them to lose to based on their recent results. Let's see. They play the Texans at home. They're actually favored on Thursday night, and that's probably why. But, I mean, right now I'm picking the Texans. Like, the Jets are awful. Completely overrated. Their secondary is still solid, but, I mean, they didn't make enough plays. Their pass rush is inconsistent. Their run defense is not good. They're only good against the Patriots. CJ Mosley was in and out of the game. Their safeties are kind of lousy against tight ends. Their offense is just up and down and all around. Like, it's all fade balls and, like, quick slants, and it's like their whole offense. I don't know. You know, like, I'm happy the Patriots won, I guess. Like, I didn't need the first pick if I'm a Patriots fan because we got Drake May. Kid's a stud. I think he's going to be a stud. He looked great early in this game. I wish he could have ended this game. That would have been a huge win for him. That would have been the first of his career. I think he would have been able to do the same thing. But give credit to Jacoby Brissett, man. He came in there. He was clutch. He was tough. I don't think you start Jacoby Brissett, even though he won this game and came in and won this game. I think you still hang with Drake May just because, you know, he's the future. But, yeah, we'll see if he's okay. He did leave with a concussion. Jets are toast. Jets are done. Jets are pathetic. They're not going anywhere. I'm done with them. I don't know how they lost this game. Like I said, no team has ever lost this game, and the Jets managed to lose this game. They did. So that's it, guys. That's week 8. That was the fate. Gronk spiked the like button. Subscribe. Peace.